guys, welcome back to the channel. On this channel we talk about everything from being a junior engineer to everything corporate life related, and today we're going to be talking about what engineers actually do besides coding that they don't actually tell you about in uni or starting your first graduate role. These things up quickly, but it's an overview of all the other things that you do besides coding when you're in corporate. Let's get right into it. The first thing, which happens in almost any enterprise that I've come across, is stand-ups. Every single morning, for me it's at 10 o'clock in the morning, the team comes together on a Teams call and they talk about what they did yesterday, how they spent their day, what they're going to do today, and any blockages that might be happening and things that are coming in the way of them completing their tickets. This is such a useful time for this team in my opinion, and I think it helps you get the overview of what the whole team is doing as well, and instead of just being down a rabbit hole of your own tickets and feeling overwhelmed with that, when you get an overview of everyone else is doing their own tickets and making progress on them, sometimes it does make you feel a bit behind, but it has more upsides than downsides to it, I believe. And you can learn so much someone's working on when you learn that one of your co-workers is doing a similar ticket and you're like, oh my god, we can work on this together. And it's just a really nice time in the morning to reflect on what you've done, your successes for the past day, and do a little planning for the rest of the day and what you're going to be doing. I know some teams in my company have it as early as 9 o'clock, first thing before they start their day. But before 9 o'clock, I like to polish up any of the work. Before 10 o'clock for me, I like to polish up any of the work that I was doing the previous day, or any deployments that I left, or catch up with any emails that have been sent and all of that. So when that gets me to 10 o'clock, where I can just start my day with reflecting on what I've done and what I'm going to do for the rest of the day and make a start on it as soon as stand-up ends. Following on from stand-ups, another things teams do really frequently is sprint planning. It happens fortnightly or every 2 weeks. Some companies only do it once a month, but it depends on the sprint length for your company. And sprint planning involves getting an overview of what you're going to be doing for a certain period of time into the future. For me, it's 2 weeks. So every sprint planning, all the tickets in the backlog, which means all the tasks that need to be allocated to be done, are brought out, and people often volunteer to take it. And for juniors, this is a good opportunity to volunteer and take on as many of the easy tickets that you think, these won't take me as long. I think it takes a few months of being in the organisation to get a hold of what tickets take long or not, but I take this opportunity to take on as many tickets which I think won't take as long, but will expose me to different systems really rapidly. And for many seniors, they like to take on 1 or 2 tickets that are high priority and will have higher value impact and bring more value into the company. But for me personally, sprint planning is an opportunity to know what tickets I've done for the past 2 weeks and get them out on my sprint board. They're out the way now, and to know where testing is up to with my tickets, where the reviews are, what tickets need prioritizing, what the priorities look like for the next 2 weeks, and what I'm going to essentially be working on, what everyone else is doing in the team and the direction that the team is moving forward. A lot of the higher ups and the leaderships, I know they take part in roadmap meetings as well, where they'll look at the bigger picture for the company and the teams. For me personally, I'm not involved in those because I'm just a junior, and so sprint planning is my opportunity to get that bigger picture of where I'm moving, what parts of the business I'm working on, and how I'm actually contributing to the business. Sprint planning looks different for every team. Some teams don't even have sprint planning, they just get the product manager to own it to them. They don't have a full meeting, but my team does have a sprint planning meeting where it's a dedicated hour slot, normally on a Thursday every 2 weeks, and the product manager will show the tickets and we'll pick and choose what we want to do and work on that. And outside of sprint planning, tickets do get created and they do get allocated as well, and you can just pick them up along the way. It's not that you'll only be doing the work that's in the sprint planning, but sprint planning just lays it all out smoothly for the next 2 weeks. The second thing which engineers do besides coding is actually looking at design architecture and knowing and working on how to lay out their code. This is something which I didn't realise how much time it takes until I started actually needing to do it, because I didn't understand the code base at the start. And even recently, which is 2 years into my journey as an engineer, I recently got a ticket where I had to spend 4 hours on 2 separate days coming up with architecture of how I'd sort out this ticket and how it would be laid out across the different systems I was using. And these are more collaborative meetings, which I'll talk about later on, but it brings those soft skills into play, and actually knowing the bigger picture in this case from sprint planning and from your roadmap meetings comes into play here, and you get to see how am I contributing to the business as a whole rather than just completing tickets on one-to-ones and getting them complete and ticking them off. It makes you whether it's even value that's needed there. Are you just adding excess baggage to the system instead of utilising what's already there? And those 4-hour meetings were absolutely dreadful, but they really put it into perspective, and for me shortened down the time that I would have spent individually working on the ticket. I think I'd say divided it by 3 easily, because the seniors involved had so much input on it and so much advice to share. And so I think engineers spend a lot of time considering design architecture, code placement, and system structure as well. I think they spend a lot of time analysing that, especially if you're a senior. I think you spend way more time doing that and have to allocate a lot more mental resource to doing that, because you're trying to, at a senior position, save the company money as well. You're trying to make the code faster, make the company more efficient, whereas as a junior, you're just completing BAU, business as usual, and just getting the business moving and just sort of oiling the cogs instead of actually putting new cogs in place in the machine. Number 3, which engineers do instead of writing code, is actually doing code reviews. No one speaks about code reviews. I guess in my last uni module, they incorporated some aspect of approving other people's pull requests, but in a corporate level, every single pull request and every single code needs to be reviewed by someone. As a junior, I was once given the advice to look at every single code review request that comes in, but not to approve everything. And I think that is the best advice I have had ever, because code reviews, not only are you practicing your code reading skills, you're understanding which system consists of which code or what new things are being added into a system. You get to know the bigger picture of what your teammates are working on, and you also get to be critical and ask any questions. You can just leave your questions on the pull request in GitHub and the seniors will answer them, and you get to see, oh, maybe this is how I was thinking about it and this is how it's actually come out. What I thought that the customers go through this journey and that's how it was, but actually there's an alternative path that can be taken. And so as a junior, you get to learn those skills. Code reading, I think it's such an essential skill, and the more you practice it, and to do it in a space where it's not your own code, it really makes you think critically about what code you're putting in place and how you can be improving your own coding practices. The way seniors code is on a different level to being a junior, especially someone who's fresh out of uni. They make the code so clean, so efficient. They use variables even differently to how I personally use them. So it makes me think. Sometimes I see myself going to the seniors' PRs that they've closed at times and just looking at their coding structure, because I know I'm doing a similar function. So I'll try and structure it in a coding manner that they like. I know one of the seniors on my team, every single one of his pull requests includes testing and writing and integrated tests. And so that has encouraged me and taught me that I should be writing tests for every single bit of code, which I wasn't doing initially until he started on the team. But ever since he started and he's shown the value and actually implemented it in practice as well, I've started implementing tests every single piece of code I write as well. So you learn from seeing how people are doing their coding. But not all the coding practices we're taught in uni are what should be carried forward, and not every YouTube tutorial will teach you how the good developers that you look up to are doing it. It's much more beneficial to see it from people who you actually admire and want to be interacting with, because you can actually get your advice on them. I can just message the senior engineer and be like, how do I write a good test? Like, does this look like a good test? And they'll write it on your PR and you can go look back at it and have feedback which you can learn from as well. Number 4, this one, I don't know if I should mention it or not, but waiting for things to build and deploy. It takes up so much time sometimes. This is not for all the systems. I think there are a lot of CI/CD pipelines which you can just click a button on GitHub and they just automatically just run. But there are some manual builds that I have to take part in, and they just take absolute ages for some builds to happen. Like, I'm talking 20-25 minutes. Yes, I could be working on something in the meantime, and I do, but most of this time I spend replying to emails, doing like my Nimble learnings and things like that. But waiting for builds to deploy and builds to actually happen, it takes up a lot of time. And especially if you're in the testing phase where you need to be reiterating your code and improving it over and over again, waiting for those builds is a dreadful part, but it takes up quite a bit of time. So I thought I'd mention it in here anyway. Number 5 of things that engineers are spending their time on is writing documentation. This, I think, is the best thing they can be spending their time on, especially as a senior who's making new system. When making new systems and tickets that haven't been done before, making documentation is the best thing you can be doing. It's a point for me, and I've had it as practice. I have my personal logbook, which I use as an engineer to keep track of all my tickets, what I'm learning from them, what I used, how I took part in those systems, all the errors that came up. But I tend to write a short piece of documentation on a new process that I'm building, or something I've taken part in which I think other people would like to be part of, but they haven't been in that meeting or may need in the future. And so I believe engineers spend quite a bit of their time writing the documentation. I know we have a few 100,000 pieces of documentation, which is scattered. It's not all the best documentation, but it exists, and it forms a valuable knowledge base of itself. When you're a junior, instead of having to ask someone 24/7, if you can just go and open a Confluence page that takes you through the process of doing something that's a repetitive action in the business, it first of all gives you a sense of independence. I've done this ticket on my own, which I know in my earlier days really empowered me to keep going and work on more tickets, and it makes you more confident that you will get the end result you want. Your PR probably won't be absolutely picked apart because you followed the process and something that's happened and you've not just soloed your way through the code base to get to a solution. Number 6, last but not least, is collaborating with teams and communicating with teams, getting mentored and mentoring, depending on where you are, whether you're a senior or a junior. Almost every single ticket comes with an aspect of collaboration, because you're not working in an isolated environment. You're working as part of a group which is your company. You need to know how the company is functioning and the business value you're providing, and so you need to collaborate with the other team. Depending on what teams you're on, you might be on a customer team, you might be on a back-end team, a front-end team, separated from one or the other, but systems don't work in isolation. They require collaboration on the back-end and front-end, and most teams actually have such smooth systems where they might not even need to interact. But for me personally, I like to interact with other engineers that are working on the front-end system and actually ask them for help. Sometimes I don't always need concrete help in coding, rarely ever is that the case, but I still tend to ask the engineers working on the other team, because they might come across my code later and wonder, what is this, what's been added? So even if I'm not asking them for help, I try to ping them a message and be like, what do you think of this? Like, could you review this PR, even though I only need approvals from my own team, just to get their viewpoint on things. And it also fosters that sense of credibility for them and for myself and my code where it's being used. It really encourages me as well, knowing that all the engineers are aware of the work I'm doing, and sometimes the other engineers have that knowledge that you don't, and they can always contribute that in and increase the value you're giving in your work. I think even one line of code from another engineer can just increase the value of what you're doing so much. And this has happened to me in the past. That's why I always meant to just collaborate with as many people as you can, not necessarily like 10 people on one singular ticket. That's really simple. But maybe if you're doing like a long-term complex project, or just a project which you think is this team might be involved in this, or I'm using a code base, you can look in GitHub at the bottom and it shows you who's contributed to this repository. It might just be worth asking them, what have you done in this repository and what were you working on? Sometimes they might just have added a readme file, but most of the time people have contributed quite a few lines of code and they have a sense of what's going on, especially if they've been here longer than you and before you. And so those are the 7 things that I think engineers do besides coding in their day-to-day job. Coding, they obviously do as part of it. It's inevitable. It's part of the job. That's what you're there for. But there's a lot of other aspects that go into being an engineer in a full-fledged company, whether that's a small size company or a huge size company. I think the concepts are pretty much the same. I think junior engineers also can benefit from knowing these things exist beforehand, and what you'll see from all 7 of these aspects is none of them are really technical. They're more soft skill based, which is what I emphasize always. Like, being an engineer, soft skills are equally as important, if not more important, than your technical skills. And so I hope you enjoyed this video. You can sign up to my newsletter down below for junior engineers and getting a grasp of things, getting them more comfortable in the journey. And you can also see all of the products and useful links down below. If you enjoyed this video, stay tuned and subscribe, and I'll hope to see you in the next video.